I never wanted this world to be the way that it has become. I know that I can't change what's wrong. The damage can't be undone. On the verge of a breakdown, I can feel it in my bones. On the verge of a breakdown, I don't wanna lose control. So please don't leave me all alone in this world, with no one there to call for help. I can't stop thinking I'm losing against the war inside myself. On the verge of a breakdown, I can feel it in my bones. On the verge of a breakdown, I don't wanna lose control. So please don't leave me all I never wanted this world to be the way that it has become. I know that I can't change what's wrong. The damage can't be undone. On the verge of a breakdown, I can feel it in my bones. On the verge of a breakdown, I don't wanna lose control. So please don't leave me all alone. Bury me softly in this wound. I give this part of me for you. Sand rains down and here I sit, holding red flowers in a tomb. Down in a hole and I don't know if I can be saved. See my heart, I decorated like a grave. Oh, you don't understand who they thought I was supposed to be. Look at me now, a man who won't let himself be. Down in a hole, How
Warning: this podcast features adult subject matter, adult language, and things not meant for children to hear. Viewer discretion is advised. You've been warned. Well, that's an awful weird way for it to look. Let's try like that. There we go. We could be. I think we are. We are live, everybody, here on the I'm No Joe YouTube channel for another episode of the I'm No Joe podcast. Nope, that's not right. That's Thursday. Sorry, I'm fucking with OBS, as you can probably see. There we go. This is the What Did I Say show? The show where I hold all of our shit talking accountable from the I'm No Joe podcast. There we go. That's a little bit better. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in with us to the latest episode here. I appreciate you all, whether you're here in the chat with us live, I see you, Dylan and Putt Putt, or whether you were catching this on a replay, I appreciate you nonetheless. So this weekend, we have had a slurry of events going on. We had the Bellator EuroSeries2, the last event from Milan before they head to France, or to Paris rather, for the first ever legal MMA episode in France. We had the Fight Night Abu Dhabi 2, Holm versus Aldana, which was a whole separate shit show that we'll talk about in a minute here. And then just a little over an hour and a half ago-ish, we had Submission Underground 18, which was a whole clusterfuck of insanity unto itself. So first and foremost, knock it out of the way. Bellator's Euro Series just doesn't cut the mustard. It's the entire series is basically the equivalent of UFC Fight Nights. They're using this to get their fluffer fights out of the way. And I get it, those fights have to take place eventually, but at least the UFC is trying to make a point to put somewhat recognizable headliners on their fight night events. In this situation, we had both 1 and 4 and 2 and 6 on the ladies bantamweight division fighting on the main card. There were ranked opponents. There was, stakes to the events or to the fights on the event on the UFC side. Bellator, the biggest thing they had going for them was their dollar store Conor McGregor and James Gallagher. Even then, he wasn't that impressive, but he thought that he was because Gallagher. But the prelims, I will give them this, the prelims for their Bellator series, or the Euro series rather, on Bellator, have all been spectacular. Last week, they were fucking great. Yesterday, they were pretty damn good, much better than the main card, in my opinion here. So I'll give them that. Scott Coker can absolutely put together a prelim card. Now, a main event, they're struggling with. And case in point, as they go to Paris to do the first ever legal MMA bouts in France, and they're bringing Czech Congo and Timothy Johnson and MVP and Mr. Houston. Just all entertaining fights potentially in their own right, but not for a main event, and sure as fuck not for historic events like the first ever live MMA event in France. That's just a fucking bad follow through, but that's what Scott Coker's running on these days. So if you need more fights, there is the Bellator Euro Series event 2 that you can always go back and recatch. I'm not even going to go over any of the fights on that card because they weren't that great, to be frank. What I do want to go over, 2 quick matches here, real quick, from this evening's Submission Underground 18 before we jump back over and talk about some UFC shit. For those of you who are not aware, Submission Underground 18 is a combat jiu-jitsu EBI style competition held by the one and only Chael Sonnen himself in a undisclosed location somewhere in upstate Oregon. It is EBI Eddie Bravo Invitational rules, combat jiu-jitsu, in that palm strikes are allowed, no punches, no kicks, no headbutts, obviously. They had both gi and no gi competitions this evening, and that was fucking beautiful to see. specifically because the gi competition that they had this evening actually ended in a lapel choke that could not have been performed in a no-gi situation or in a regular MMA situation. That's something that you can only get in the gi because you have to be able to literally grab the collar and put that tension across. And in this situation, not only did he have the lapel choke across the front, he also, also had a Kimura threat from the back because he had the back of the gi pulled from one side and the front of the gi pulled from the other. So if he wanted to, he could have let go of the lapel choke and just taken the, or not Kimura, I apologize, armbar. He could have let go of the neck and taken the arm if he wanted to, but as soon as he started putting that pressure on the carotid from that lapel choke, dude tapped and knew it immediately because as soon as they were done, you could see him go, fuck. So that was pretty fucking cool. The other thing that was pretty significant, in my opinion, here, we had seen Zangief go out there and look a little rough the last few times. You could see he kind of bullied his way through his first few matches. And then the later couple of events he was in, the guys started to get matched up with him, were a little more technical, still obviously almost always smaller than him because Zangief is a fucking monster. But you could tell that the guys they were matching him up with were starting to get more on the technical side. They were really going that old school UFC Gracie mentality, the martial arts, the martial arts practitioner against the bigger, stronger, brutish guy, albeit Zangief still has a black belt and he's still always dangerous everywhere. But I kind of agree with the fact that they're trying to put him up against more technical guys because he seems to be using his strength more than his technique. And we saw this evening exactly why they're starting to put the more technical guys against him, because we're at a point now where even the competitors are starting to notice that Zangief almost relies on being able to outwork his competition by imposing his strength rather than using the technique and the skill that this is kind of implied or centered around rather. And he got choked the fuck out tonight. He, again, was trying to use his strength, trying to press down on a guy from the top to keep him where he wanted him. And the gentleman flipped around, wrapped him up, and good night, Gracie. Zangief got fucking choked. The other big relevant thing that happened on Submission Underground 18 this evening, for those of you who saw it Thursday, because we talked about it a little bit on the I'm No Joe podcast from Thursday, I'm telling you now, I'm going to tell you again in December when his next defense of his belt comes up. Mason Fowler is the future of submission grappling. Submission Underground has one king, the unified open weight king, for a reason, and that king is Mason Fowler. And people dismissed him when he beat Craig Jones the first time because there was controversy around the verbal tap, which he himself admitted he fucking verbally tapped. I don't understand why there was controversy, but there was. So they ran it back and they removed the verbal tap rule, and Mason Fowler got Craig Jones again from that fucking RNC and choked him until he physically tapped the second time. Still, people could not fucking accept that Mason Fowler is the future of submission grappling. So they put it on the line. The original, the number one Submission Underground open weight champion, Vinny Magalhaes, the last man to have been defeated by Craig, spiral fractured in his fucking tibia and did not tap. Vinny Magalhaes, arguably one of the top three grapplers in the world on unfuckwithableness. And yes, that's a word. Everyone was just so convinced that the only person who was able to give Craig, prior to Mason, any kind of problems was Vinny, because Vinny also understands that Danaher Death Squad leg lock bullshit, and he also knew how to defend against it. We also know that Vinny has remarkably and almost disturbingly flexible joints. He can pull his arm all the way, or his wrist all the way back over. He can twist his arms and legs to the point where normal people are cringing. But he couldn't hold off against Craig. When Craig grabbed a hold of that fucking leg and put the twist on it, you saw in the replay that they even showed before the match tonight, Craig let go and his eyes got the size of dish plates because he said he felt Vinny's leg pop 3 separate times in 3 separate places. And he looked up and Vinny didn't know why he stopped. Vinny wasn't going to tap. He wasn't going to quit. Vinny was going to finish the fucking regulation time and then bow out before overtime came in, because obviously his fucking leg was destroyed. But when Craig finally let go and it popped and everything, everyone realized that was it. So everyone assumed that Vinny being back to good, quote unquote, air quotes for those listening, Vinny being back to good was supposed to be the recipe to spell Mason's downfall. Because if Craig couldn't get it done in 2, Vinny should have been able to get it done in 1 when he had 2 different instances of Craig versus Mason to watch the tape of and figure out the holes in his game he would want to capitalize. Well, sorry, boys and girls, Vinny is a bad motherfucker, and I am a huge Vinny Magalhaes fan. I've been singing Vinny Magalhaes' praise for the longest fucking time, but I said going into this fucking match, this is not a long enough time for Vinny to get a full heal on that leg and get back to training 100% and train specifically for Mason's very aggressive and very fucking wily style. Credit where credit is due. I always fucking say it, regardless of how you feel about a situation or a fighter. Credit where credit is due. Vinny Magalhaes put on some of the smoothest fucking submission attempts I have ever seen in my life. And there was a moment where I was legitimately fucking worried for Mason because he was in a bad spot. Vinny had him dead to fucking rights in an armbar and had stretched him out and straightened him, had the tension put on just fucking right. It looked like Mason was in serious fucking trouble. Mason alligator rolls and steps the fuck out of it. Vinny came to fucking play. Vinny came very fucking serious. But when it came down to EBI rules, overtime, 3 overtimes, you get your position choice. Vinny went for that arm lock every fucking time, the step over armbar positioning, and every fucking time Mason immediately rolled backwards, took all the pressure off his arm, and eventually wriggled his fucking way out. All 3 times, Mason chose to take the fucking seatbelt, the backpack position from the back legs through, arms over, but not under the neck. And all 3 times, Mason was able to hold Vinny longer than Vinny was able to hold Mason. So Mason Fowler wins, retains his belt, wins on overtime, time escape minimalization. He got out of every position Vinny had him in quicker than Vinny could get out of what he had. And Mason Fowler is once again confirmed the Submission Underground open weight ultimate champion. Uncle Chael announced after the match that they already know who and when the next match for Mason Fowler is going to be. It's December 12th. I do not remember the gentleman's name because it's not been printed yet. It's just something Chael said. The gentleman that he will be competing against is a world judo champion, taking his place in the Submission Underground grappling world, trying to bring the judo skill set into a mainly jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu at that world, basically. So that's going to be interesting, and we're definitely going to talk about that a little more as we get closer to that. Excuse me. Take a drink real quick, and we will talk about some of this weekend's UFC interestingness. So, our first UFC Fight Night from Abu Dhabi after UFC 253. We've got 2 more fight nights and then UFC 254 before they wrap up this Abu Dhabi trip and come back to Vegas. The first one, UFC Fight Night, AldanaVsHolm. We talked about it on the podcast on Thursday. This was just a bad card from top to bottom. Originally, it was a 4-fight main event card. 4, just 4. Of those 4, only 2 of those fights had ranked fighters in them. They added a 5th fight. Neither of the fighters that had gotten added were ranked from that fight either, so we moved it up to 5 fights on the main card, but still only the main event and then the people's co-main event, the 3rd from last fight, had ranked fighters, and it was all the ladies from the 135-pound division, the bantamweight ladies that we were talking about earlier. 1 and 4, 2 and 6, which unto itself was a weird matchup to begin with. But so opening fight, right out of the gate. Generally on these fights, the opening fight is exciting and then it kind of tails off and you get a little bit of a roller coaster effect here. That was absolutely the case here. Let me see if I can bring up the card real quick just so I can say this gentleman's name correctly because it is a hell of a name. First fight, first knockout, and it was fucking spectacular. It was very, very impressive. Caught everyone by guard. It was kind of one of those situations where you literally aren't in the mood or in the zone, quote unquote, yet. Okay, let's see. Excuse me. Let's see. Give me just a moment. I'm pulling up the card from this weekend right now. Here we go. His name was Luigi Vendramini. I spelled it close in my notes. I wasn't too far off. Luigi Vendramini. Holy shit. Beautiful KO to start the card out here. Right into the second fight. The hype coming into this fight around Casey Kenny has just been building and building and building more and more the closer we got to the actual fight itself. It lived up to every bit of the hype. Casey Kenny was putting on a fucking show. The issue really was that the gentleman that he's fighting, Haley Alatang, was taking every single shot, kick, punch, everything that Casey Kenny was throwing and walking right through it. And I don't mean it wasn't affecting him. He was busted the fuck up very badly, but he walked right through it. He looked like a fucking bantamweight Terminator. This dude was taking everything he had to fucking give. And at the end of the match, the entirety of the side of his ribs, you could see the literal bruising in between the individual rib bones on his side. Casey Kenny had kicked in that same spot so many times, so fucking hard, very tiny Jan Blachowicz-ish, if you will. I tell you what, Casey Kenny, he did good. He's, I'm not saying the hype around him is warranted or is real, but I'm saying he did good. And if he keeps improving as a new guy, he's going to be okay. But what I'm saying more predominantly and more emphatically than watch Casey Kenny is watch Haile Alatang. That motherfucker is a tank. And if he can walk through what he walked through and then improve on his striking going into his next match moving forward, that dude is going to be a very, very big problem. And I think Casey Kenny kind of got lucky it went to decision because I think realistically, if it would have went 5 rounds, he'd have gassed himself out and Alatang would have fucked him up. That being said, the first ladies fight, Jinyu Frey versus Loma Lookboonmee, was fucking spectacular. Loma Lookboonmee looked fucking great, and I think she's got a fucking great future ahead of her. Skip ahead a little bit here. Charles Jourdain versus Josh Cuolibao. I tell you what, I might not have been the biggest Cuolibao fan coming into this fight, but I sure the fuck am coming out of this fight. Charles Jourdain was a fucking clown. He looked like a tiny little version of Michel Pereira. He was doing all kinds of flashy and jumpy shit, and it was so easy to read. Ray Charles could see what he was trying. It was fucking sad. He looked pathetic. He looked like he was trying to be flashy for the sake of being flashy, not trying to win the fight. Cuolibao on the other side was all fucking business. Showed up, game plan, fight IQ, adjusted in the moment, did what he needed to do to neutralize everything Jourdain fucking threw at him. That dude was just cool under fucking pressure, man. Fucking major props to Josh Cuolibao, in my opinion here. The issue I had here was that they called it a draw. I don't think it was that close. I'm confident from watching it. Cuolibao won that fight. The people that were watching that fight with me pretty much agreed that Cuolibao won that fight. But a draw is not an L, so, under the circumstances, we'll take it and we'll go along. Excuse me. Then we get to the quote-unquote premier prelim fight. I get that they haven't made this Veterans League or this Legends League or whatever the fuck you want to call it yet. And there isn't officially a place for older fighters to go and still put on the matches that they wanted to but never got to in their prime. The issue is that they're doing it in the regular context of MMA, and that I don't feel has a place. This was a perfect example. I am a big fan of both Court McGee and Carlos Condit. The Natural Born Killer is a fucking favorite of mine. These gentlemen are both surely headed for the UFC Hall of Fame at some point. The problem is that neither one of these gentlemen have been in their prime for over a couple of years. Carlos Condit got the win on decision, but this, even being a decision, was his first win since 2015. They both looked legitimately terrible. Neither one of those gentlemen looked like they belong in an octagon, let alone in Abu Dhabi, for fuck's sake. That was just bad. They should never have gotten to that point. Neither one of those gentlemen should have been considered for a fight in Abu Dhabi. But, you know, Dana knows better than the rest of us, clearly. The one thing I will say about this fight that I'm not sure if I would say it surprised me, but it was a standout moment for sure, and it's something that will be talked about this week in the MMA journalists circles. Court McGee, after, I don't remember if it was after round 1 or round 2, Carlos Condit had literally turned his nose into a fucking slash mark. It was no longer straight. It was full on bent and moved to the side. And in the corner, he literally grabbed it himself and pulled it out and straightened it back up perfectly. He straightened it his fucking self in between rounds and then kept fighting. That's bad motherfucker right there. If you've ever fucked your nose up, you understand how crucially painful that is, not just on your nose, but when you hurt your nose, it hurts your entire face. It hurts the majority of your head. That fucking pain radiates out. He not only snapped his fucking nose clearly from a crooked line back to normal, but did it in between rounds himself and then fought more with it. Props to Court McGee for being a tough motherfucker. That being said, bringing us into the main card, and still I see even now the UFC could not get the fucking order of the fights right, even on their own website. The new Slavic gentleman that they made a point of highlighting before his fight, Dusko Todorovic, came in and just absolutely fucking handled Daquan Townsend. And I've been singing Daquan Townsend's praises by my fucking self for a minute now, because I thought that motherfucker had what it took. And I think at this point, I just have to admit that I was fucking wrong. The glimpses that I saw that I thought were potential were apparently just flukes, because he has not won a single fight in the UFC and seems to be arguably getting worse the longer he's there. So I think at this point, it's time to cut that motherfucker loose, let him go back to a local circuit, get some more fucking experience, maybe try again later on down the road. That being said, we went from there to what was actually the next fight, despite the UFC website still not having it fucking corrected, even though the event is over now. Cameron Else versus Kyler Phillips. The last time we saw Kyler Phillips, he was this tiny little bouncy looking guy, and he comes back MMA Jesus. He's got the long flowing hair, the full beard is locked in. He had it all braided up and everything now, but I mean, Kyler Phillips has apparently taken advantage of his time off and has sharpened his fucking tool set efficiently, because he came back in looking great. Well, compared to what we saw of him before he took his little hiatus, he looked spectacular in my opinion. He was moving good. He was reading the fight. He was adjusting in the moment. It was nice to see. Even with the way he had his hair, especially with the way he had his hair done, he looked like a young Benson Henderson. So much so that we were joking before the fight actually started that he better watch out for Cameron Else to throw an off the cage fucking spinning sidekick. And he looked like the good version of young Benson Henderson. So props to Kyler for getting that KO on his return back. Now, moving into the People's Co-main event, the one of the two ladies fights of ranking on the main card. So I will preface it by saying this. We talked about it a little bit on I'm No Joe, but I've actually spoken with several people since then, and we pretty much all agree. The matchups for this card on the ladies' side are a little ridiculous. If you're going to have 4 ladies in the top 10 fighting on a fight night, making it one of those matches the main event, you have 1, 2, 4, and 6. Logically, you would assume that 1 and 2 would be fighting for the next title shot. 4 and 6 would be fighting to step up into that place when whichever one of the two of them wins that. That's not the case. That's not the way that we had things. We had 1 fighting 4 and 2 fighting 6. Well, the 2 and 6 match, Duran Duraname versus Juliana Pena, kind of went a way that no one other than, I will say, GDR actually said during one of the press events that she wanted to end this fight in a submission because everyone always assumes that she only has hands because she's shown that she only has hands. She is genuinely terrible on the ground with track records to prove. Then we get this matchup against Juliana Pena, who both of them really looked pretty lackluster in the early rounds rather. Third round, things started to pick up, and then out of fucking nowhere, Pena gets sloppy, and Jermaine Duraname locks in a fucking strong guillotine and puts her to fucking sleep. Like literally slept Pena. She says she told the ref 3 times that she was out. You can't see that in the replay, but you can see that by the time she stopped moving and then the ref came immediately over to check on her, she was already limp. She was already completely fucking out. So I will say I don't understand how Pena is still ranked number 4, seeing as how she's only had 1 fight in the last 4 years, and it was against Nico Montano, who wasn't fucking relevant in the rankings at any point anyways. But she just got her ass beat, and I think it's time to drop her in the very least out of the top 10. She isn't active. She isn't winning. Get her the fuck out of the numbers. And I know that there are people who are immediately going to cry about Conor after that, but that's a whole different conversation for another day. So moving on from there, that will bring us to the absolute dumpster fire of a co-main event. This is one of the things that I talked about Thursday, and I have talked about it with everyone who has listened or talked about it since then. We had 1 fighting 4, 2 fighting 6 on the ladies bantamweight. And then for the co-main event, we have unranked heavyweights. Unranked big boy soup cans. I will say this, the fight wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. It was not good. It was not a good fight by any stretch of the imagination. Yorgan de Castro should be fucking ashamed of himself for that fight. Carlos Felipe is a little greener, had a little less experience, but did more and was actively doing better in that fight than de Castro was. But still, both of them don't brag on that fight. And Dana White is an asshole for making that the co-main event. Those guys are so far from fucking ready to be anywhere near the big time fucking spot like that. And it was very evident watching that fight. The problem is that once that fight is over, that brings you into the aggravating point of realization that the main event is garbage, and just as garbage as the co-main event, just as garbage as the fight before that. The only saving grace from the whole fucking main card was the Kyler Phillips fight, which is very disappointing unto itself, even though I like Kyler Phillips. Holly spent, let's put it this way. When Israel Adesanya is legitimately using his length and his footwork to stay out of a guy's range so that he can pick him apart, people cry that he spends his whole time running. Holly Holm did so much running, legitimately running to the left during that fight, that the first question, it's either the first or the second question she got asked in the post-fight press conference was, do you know how many miles you clocked in the octagon tonight? And her response was, well, if I can run on a treadmill for 4 hours at home, I can run in an octagon for 25 minutes in a fight. But no one wants to say that Holly Holm was running. Everyone wants to say Holly Holm was using her footwork and she was staying on the bicycle. No, Holly Holm was legitimately doing run by punching and run by kicking. And even those weren't that fucking great. The problem was Aldana never cut off the octagon. She never took Holly's escape right away. She kept letting her turn and kept chasing her and following her around instead of stepping in front of her to the left or laying a fucking kick out so Holly would head right into it. Something to deter Holly from doing fucking laps all fucking night, and she didn't. She didn't do anything to make Holly even consider stopping running or getting serious about the fucking match. And then the worst part for me is that she herself had the balls to go to the press conference and say that she put on a dominant performance and showed her well-roundedness as a fighter when she literally, I think, landed less than 50 strikes total. That's kicks and punches in a 5-round fucking fight. The only thing I will say that has saving grace to that match and that fucking situation is that Holly herself said she doesn't think that fight warrants her an immediate title fight with Amanda. She's just going to look at her next fight and see whatever the UFC gives her and go from there. I will give her that. I still feel like Dana's going to try and push the fucking title fight angle, but we did get some mention that potentially the Jermaine Durandame Holly Holm rematch might happen first. Let me see. Fucking mosquito. That's going to drive me insane. Okay, 1 second here. I thought I had written down the performance bonuses. I was wrong. Just a moment. We'll pull those up right now. So, once again, Dana is a fucking idiot and doesn't have a fight of the night bonus. He just does multiple performance of the night bonuses. And I think that's bullshit because that was an opportunity for 2 people to get a bonus because it takes 2 to tango. 4 fight of the night bonuses instead. Durandame, who I get that fucking submission of Pena, putting her to fucking sleep. I get it. Kyler Phillips, I understand it was a beautiful fucking finish. He absolutely deserved that. Dusko Todorovic, the Slav that put Mr. Townsend to fucking sleep. I get it. And then Luigi Vendramini, the gentleman who opened the card with a beautiful fucking knockout in 72 seconds. I get why all 4 of those were eligible for performance of the night. That being said, I still think realistically it should have been Durandame and Phillips with performance of the night, and then there should have been a fight of the night bonus. But, you know, Dana knows better than the rest of us do, clearly. So we'll just have to see how that all plays out once we get the results shaken back through after this upcoming week's craziness. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. That is all we have got for this particular episode. Thank you, everyone who hung out live. I see you, Buick. Thank you to everyone who catches this on a replay. I appreciate you, each and every one of you here. That is all we've got for this particular episode. I don't know yet if we are going to have a Joe Luminaries episode this week. We don't really have a lot of news going on, so probably not. We might go old school Thursday again instead. But either way, regardless, I will see everyone Thursday night, 9:30 Central Time, for the I'm No Joe podcast, your home for all things punchy kicky, the show where every armchair quarterback can feel like he's Eddie Bravo. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for this evening. So if you enjoy what we do around here, give us a thumbs up. If we give you the news you crave, subscribe and hit the notifications so you don't miss an episode here. If you really love what we do in the I'm No Joe channel here, share an episode. We're trying to grow the damn thing. You want to support us? Patreon.com/I'mNoJoe. Otherwise, you can catch us on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram at I'm No Joe, YouTube, obviously, at I'm No Joe. But if the faces are too distracting, if the looks get you and you can't focus, fret not, mon ami. We've got you covered there as well. The I'm No Joe podcast is available in all audio form on your podcast consumption platform of choice through anchor.fm/I'm No Joe. But that's all we've got for this evening. We're going to go ahead and get the hell on out of here. So I do want to thank everyone who came along for the ride and everyone who's catching this on a replay. We are going to call it all for now. Again, remember, don't let ignorance stop you. You can root for anything unless you still think stand back and stand by is denouncing. And then you're fucked.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening.
How do I say goodbye to what we had? The good times that